the many little universes that make up you. And gratitude for the ability to be a conduit, bringing light and love and peace to this place, and exchanging it to let go of darkness, let go of fear, let go of everything that keeps you small. Breathe in and expand into your fullness and your power. Slowly opening your eyes, evading this moment. Everyone here has joined us.
All right, we welcome you. We know you come here for different reasons: to find community, to seek your spiritual and personal truths, to question, to nurture your heart and soul, to be nurtured, to explore new ideas, to find comfort, and perhaps to find answers to some of our bigger questions. We welcome you. We know you come from different places, different religions, different beliefs, and different backgrounds. We hope you will find comfort, connection, challenge, and love here. We welcome you. To all who are here this morning in person and via Zoom, welcome home. A special welcome to any first-time visitors. Keep going. Okay. We invite you to stay for coffee and refreshments after the service. If you are on Zoom, please mute yourselves. So if you are here in person, please silence your cell phones. Thank you. And announcements are in your bulletin. And we're very flexible here. All right, Chalice lighting words. Day breaks on our gratitude for family and friends, for the freedom to find our own truth, and for the company of those who gather here. As we light the chalice, let the light of day bring great grace into our lives. Oh, it's feedback. As surely as we belong to the universe, we belong together. We join here to transcend the isolated self, to reconnect, to know ourselves, to be at home, here on earth, under the stars, linked with each other. All right, we're going to have our first song, This Little Light of Mine, number 118 in your songbook. Please stand as you're willing and able.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Living up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Living up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. There's two right here. Living up the world, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
We do have these. Are we going to sing them out then? Are we having a youth program today?
Yes.
Okay. All right, in your bulletin. Go now in peace, go now in peace. May joys and concerns. Ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a spiritual community where we find meaning. Ours is a sharing community where our joys are amplified, a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. We take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge the mutual support of our community. If you have a joy or concern, please come up to the microphone so Zoom attendees can hear you, and place a piece of sea glass into the water chalice. If you prefer, I can put the glass into the chalice for you. I know, this is a new one.
So my joy is that my family is recovering from various things. Thea had a crazy infection that caused auditory and visual hallucinations, and I thought it was really the beginning of the end. But she's amazing. She's almost 95 and she's recovered, so that's great. And Eden was in the ER last week for upper respiratory virus, and today she's going to be in a ballet recital. So life is full of ups and downs. If anyone is bored and wants to see a bunch of adorable children perform ballet in extremely, I don't know if anyone knows about etudes in Whitestone, but they're amazing. So 4 p.m. at Northumberland Middle/High School Auditorium will be a really adorable recital.
My joy this morning is I had a wonderful email exchange with Susan this past week. She is doing well, getting settled, has her driver's license changed and all those kind of paperwork things that you have to do, and is starting the work of getting the auto mechanic and the doctors and the hairdressers and all those things that are associated with the move. She misses us. I told her we certainly missed her and are wishing her well as she continues her progress.
Well, where do I begin? First, I'm doing my best Diana impression. This is one of 4 dresses that I had tailored in Harare, Zimbabwe. I was there the last 3 weeks. I came back a week ago. It was an exceptional trip. It was so good that next week I'm going for 3 weeks to Rwanda. And while I was away, thank you to all who helped Lois with getting here and there and keeping her moving. So, second, I was the first car in the parking lot today. Because I thought a 9 o'clock meeting was taking place. That was not meditation. But I say this in honor of Don, which is, there was a little turtle in the parking lot. And little turtle is now in the woods. And I think that's all I have to say. But I will be here next Sunday, and then I'm off to Rwanda to train lady farmers who run a soybean factory, and I'm supposed to help them with productivity. It'll be interesting. Thank you.
May we remember those who have spoken, those they have named, and those we hold in silence in our hearts. I put this piece of sea glass into the water to represent all of our unspoken joys and concerns. Alane, do you have a reading for us?
I should have done this in Joys of Concerns. Y'all, we are now a 2 glasses woman. There was not sufficient warning about this life change. All right, and also we remain a 6-foot-tall woman. So our reading today is from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory. He was a profound theologian, not just in Judaism, but also in Judeo-Christian thought of the 20th century. And I studied him quite a bit, probably in the 1990s. And imagine my surprise when I found out 2 weeks ago, all those years of studying him, that he was also a poet. Don't tell my husband, he's sitting right there, but a book of his poetry is on the way to the house. So next time maybe I'll read you some poetry. But this is from a collection of his, a spiritual anthology called I Asked for Wonder. And if you're not familiar with him, it's a lovely introduction to his way of thinking. This particular passage is called Unique. Looking upon myself from the perspective of society, I'm an average person. Facing myself intimately, immediately, I regard myself as unique, as exceedingly precious, not to be exchanged for anything else. No one will live my life for me. No one will think my thoughts for me, or dream my dreams. In the eyes of the world, I am average. But to my heart, I am not average. To my heart, I am of great moment. The challenge I face is how to actualize the quiet eminence of my being. May our time together help us as we try to figure out who we are, as one, as many, as average, as exceptional.
Now comes the fun part. Our speaker today is the Reverend Alane Cameron Ford. Alane is a woman of many talents. Not only is she the host of Deaf Club Radio, I have yet to check into that, a talk show on WRIR 97.3 in Richmond. But after spending most of her career in hospice, she now works in the field of organ donation. Alane is a singer and lyricist for a punk band. I'm curious about that too. And believes that punk rock helped her heal from long COVID. She prefers Star Trek to Star Wars. Cost instead of pizza, yes. And dogs over cats, absolutely. But she says she's flexible on that one too. Sometimes she forgets that she's also an ordained Unitarian Universalist minister and tells us, "Thank you for encouraging me to be that person too." We are delighted that you are that person too. Alane's topic today is, Where Art Thou, Dear Abby? Etiquette in a Divided World. If we want to move forward, build communities, and find common ground, we must first agree to some shared values of interaction. Is that now impossible? Or is now the best possible time to try? Let's join her as she leads our discussion of the ideas of shared meaning, peaceful interactions, and communication etiquette. Alane? And back up. And thank you, whoever is working out our challenges of sound. We appreciate you, and we're glad it's not us trying to figure that out. Let me just get all my stuff here.
I totally forgot that that was my introduction, and so imagine my joy that I brought my story captain's log. That is where my words today are written. One should always have a captain's log. Okay, the first thing I have to do is not only do I have to change glasses, but I'm at the age now where I have to do a check to make sure people know what on earth I'm talking about. Is there anyone who doesn't know what Dear Abby is? Excellent. I was scolded a few years ago. My husband and I gave a speech for the Virginia Library Association. And a young, beautiful, and seemingly very enthusiastic woman came up and scolded me for not explaining who Andy Griffith was. So now I'm very careful. So today we're going to be talking about communication and peacemaking, but we're also going to be talking about self-awareness because that is a huge part of it. You'll hear a little bit about organ donation. Sadly, you will not be hearing about punk rock today, maybe at another time. Yeah, I'd like to start out with a story, a parable, if you will, but it's a true story. It's something I lived. And I'd like you to imagine a quieter wing on a hospital. There's a nurse's station in the middle, and the wing is shaped like an L, so half the patients are on this side and half the patients are down the hall. And right in the middle in the nurse's station, there are 4 women, including myself, and then on both wings there are patients, very quiet patients because it is a hospice unit. On this particular day, the 4 women, we were doing what we normally did, which was comedy therapy. Some people say that, and I think actually it was a Randy Travis song about old women who like to talk about old men. On this unit, we just like to talk about anything as long as it was funny. And we would tell stories on our own families and on our other co-workers and on our patients, but they were never bitter stories. They were bittersweet stories because there was plenty to be bitter about on a hospice unit, and we didn't need any more of that. So I do not recall exactly what we were talking about. One of our favorite subjects was my favorite nurse, who was named Lisa, an African-American woman who had this fantastic North Carolina accent. She was about my age, and she watched something that I need the reference for, Petticoat Junction. Lisa would come in and talk about Petticoat Junction. And all these white women would look at her and be like, what? She's like, it's your thing. Yeah. It was not our thing. We didn't know. So let's say we were all talking about Petticoat Junction at this moment. And suddenly we felt something. And we all agreed we felt it before we saw it. We had our backs to the wing that went that way. We're talking, and we all kind of look up, and we turn around. And before us are 3 Buddhist monks, completely draped in orange robes, shaved heads, and we couldn't tell from the counter, but probably sandals. Not a one of them speaking English. They come up, they've already made it to the front, and they're just standing there quietly. And I was the one who actually had summoned them. And so I just pointed down the hallway and I gave them this number because that was the room number. And off they went. And I don't know if they had come to us single file, but they left us single file. There was a leader and a follower and then a little novice at the end. And the little novice, the leaders, follower, novice. We tried to keep him, but we didn't know the language to ask for him to stay. So the three Buddhist monks go in and they visit the patient, and they're there for quite some time, probably 45 minutes to an hour. And we kind of asked each other, did you feel that? And I said, yes. I said, is it still here? It still feels different. And we all agreed it did, but we couldn't agree on what the difference was. Was it the feeling of a cool breeze in a stuffy room? Or was it a cool stillness in a hot wind? Whatever it was peaceful. And we all hoped that we would still be, or we could come back to the nurses' station to see them as they left. And so when they came back, we were all a little more aware that they're walking leader, follower, novice. And there we were, 4 women, all novices. And then they left. And we talked about them for weeks, and it's been over 10 years, and I'm still talking about them. Because they weren't the usual for us. They weren't our usual visitors. We were accustomed to this one inappropriately flirty funeral director. He was always Michelle's problem. We didn't have to deal with him. And then there was this darling woman on the cleaning staff who had an impenetrable accent. She was so friendly, so nice. We couldn't understand a word she said. And she was from Richmond, Virginia. And then there was a respiratory therapist. He always came to see me and quietly would show me pictures of his husband and the work they were doing on the house and in the garden. And then, of course, we had a lot of very quiet and sad family members. That was what we were accustomed to. We were not accustomed to 3 Buddhist monks dressed in orange, a leader, a follower, and a novice. Lately, I have been teaching a great deal of classes to the people I work with. Working in trauma every day, we have discovered that communication becomes more and more difficult, interestingly, the longer you work in trauma. The reason I say I work in trauma is because in order to be an organ donor, you have to be on a ventilator. And many of the things that cause people to be on a ventilator are sudden, surprising, and shocking. So we're dealing with things that humans aren't necessarily very good at dealing with. Great big waves of grief and surprise, and the need to adjust very, very quickly to a constantly changing life or death environment. So I've been teaching the people I manage and the other people who work with families and with doctors and nurses how to have better conversations. And the hilarious thing is I spent 1.5 years teaching them this, and it wasn't working. And so we had to hire actors to come in to talk. like we can't talk. We've got to hire an actor, and the actor is going to talk with us. But for whatever reason, it's working. The actors come in, and we talk about better communication. And in doing that, we've had a program for about 1 year. We actually have the largest actor training program in organ donation in the country. And considering the United States is the greatest, largest country involved in organ donation and does the most in the world, that means we have the biggest in the world. Or at least that's what my quiet self tells me. You have the biggest actor training in the world. And then the rest of the world sees me as an average person, a la Abraham Joshua Heschel. So in teaching these classes, I finally gave in. Does anyone ever get, when somebody tells you, you gotta hear this song, or you gotta see this show, or you gotta read this book, anybody rebel a little and think, what do you know? What do you know? My husband and I have many a time had to finally just give up and see the show and admit that we liked it, or listen to music and admit that was cool. But our first response is, oh, what do you know? You don't know. So I'd heard all these people saying, oh, Brene Brown, you need to read Brene Brown. Well, there are 4 words that make me not want to read Brene Brown. New York Times bestseller. I've just found, and for those of you who don't know us, my husband's a librarian, and so we get a little snooty about the bestsellers sometimes. Like, we're not going to like that. We're too refined. Brene Brown is exceptional and amazing, and I've read 2 of her books in the past 3 weeks, and we'll be reading more. And she is a social worker with a PhD, and her specialty is 2 areas that I have to deal with constantly in teaching people how to communicate better. And those 2 areas are vulnerability and shame. And I'm here to tell you that my thesis today is that what is dividing our country and the world, what is making our Thanksgiving dinners stressful and our situations with our neighbors weighted down, is that we have forgotten how to deal with vulnerability and shame. We have forgotten how to have the courage to face the feelings that are behind those. Behind vulnerability is fear, and behind shame is anger. Or you can switch it. Vulnerability leads to fear, and shame leads to anger. In that class I've been teaching, and for these purposes, I'm no longer the novice. I'm the grumpy guy in front, the leader. In these classes, as my students tell me how uncomfortable they are with angry loved ones, and I say, what's happened to our donor, their loved one, is awful. Wouldn't you be angry? It's something that causes anger. But what we also need to know is that anger and fear are the blossoms of a dandelion. So fear is when we have all the wispy seedlings, that part of the dandelion. And part of the reason fear is there is because you just blow on fear and it goes everywhere, right? You have all those little seedlings all over the place. And anger is the yellow blossom of the dandelion. One day you have 2 or 3 in the yard, and another day it is a whole field of gold. Anger just kind of sneaks up on you. But the reason they're dandelions is because it isn't the blossom. You don't get rid of fear and anger by dealing with the blossom. It's called a lion for a reason. A dandelion has those immense roots and those super sturdy leaves. That is what we have to work on. So we think we have to work on these little flowers, but really we have to work on the roots and the leaves. So Brene Brown, in most, at least in the books that I've read thus far and the ones I've perused, she uses this quote again and again from Theodore Roosevelt, from a speech he gave in 1910 called the Man in the Arena speech. And of course, I'll be changing the language to make it more appropriate for all of us. And in that speech, Theodore Roosevelt said, "It is not the critic who counts, not the person who points out how the strong person stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the one of us who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if that person fails, at least fails while daring greatly." This has become a touchstone for Dr. Brown, And she says that all of us at some time are face down in the arena. Maybe the crowd has gone silent, the way it does at football games or field hockey matches when the players on the field take a knee because someone is hurt. Or maybe people have started booing or jeering. On a cultural level, Brown writes, I think the absence of honest conversation about the hard work that takes us from lying face down in fear in the arena to rising strong has led to dangerous outcomes. The propensity to gold plate what is essentially grit and what Brown, I'm just quoting here, calls a deficit of badassery. Is it possible that in the difficulty in communicating with each other, in connecting, is it possible that the divisiveness is partly a lack of courage on all of our parts? When we feel the most courageous is when that anger has fueled us and we feel self-righteous, but that is not badassery. That is simply covering shame or vulnerability. The person who knew the best, I think, at least publicly, about badassery and what I think Brown means by it, and certainly what I mean about it, was Dear Abby. So, does anyone remember Dear Abby's real name? Something I don't remember the last name. And that's what I thought too, but just like the poetry of Abraham Joshua Heschel, that was the full pen name. Her real name,
I got it.
get it girl.
Jean Phillips.
Ah, that's the daughter. Jean Phillips is the daughter, yes. Mama, the OG Abby, is Pauline Friedman Phillips. And Pauline really was twins with Ann Landers, whose name was Esther. And for anyone who has twins in their family like I do, you'll want to know that Esther Ann Landers was born 17 minutes before Abby Pauline. So those who know twins understand what I'm saying there. So when I was a child, well, I'd say a teenager, starting around my teenager years, I would go to visit my grandmother in West Point. My grandmother, who was known as Janie Bell. Here I'm making fun of Southern accents, and I will give you that. And Janie Bell would always have a pile of Dear Abbeys for me. And then, again, they were not bitter. They were not like, step in line, kid, this is what Dear Abby has to say. They were always really clever and funny and interesting and really took on things that were quite hard. So in this stressful job I have, sometimes I show up early for work when nobody's there so I can kind of get myself together before the day goes completely crazy. And I have a coworker, Dear Abby. I go to work early for my stressful job, and I have a coworker who comes in at 8:20, day after day, yelling into her phone. I've been there an hour trying to get myself together, and she just yells, how rude, Dear Abby. She's so disruptive. What should I do? Dear Abby would answer questions like that. The OG Dear Abby would answer questions like that, and questions like, Dear Abby, our family celebrations are so awkward. My sister and brother and I don't have anything in common now that we're older, and their kids are obnoxious, but we've got to see them at Thanksgiving. What do we do? And Abby would write an answer, and then I'm just checking here. Anybody ever heard the was it a John Prine song about Dear Abby? Yeah. Man, the years are just going by. Where's my third set of glasses? My grandmother would leave me these clippings, and I realized that in so doing, Abby was the leader, my grandmother was the follower, and I was the novice. And she was kind of helping me along, helping me find a way to find a middle ground. What Dear Abby was best at was revealing people's vulnerability without shaming them. So her answer to a letter like mine would be something along the lines of, "Dear early to rise or early to work, how conscientious of you to get to work early. But perhaps your coworker is also preparing for their rough day by talking to a friend who is building them up before they start the day." This is something I started to realize as I heard extensively of these conversations morning after morning. I would suggest, dear reader, that perhaps that would be a good time for you to exercise your legs or to do something that is helpful and inspirational to you. Or maybe, and this is not necessarily Dear Abby, or maybe think as to why this is so threatening to you. Abby always found a way to make us think, where is our vulnerability? Where is our fear? What are we hiding from that isn't in the story? I think that the greatest vulnerability that we have, and again, each of us is very, very different. But the greatest vulnerability we have as the population grows and our connections to each other seems to grow through the internet and social media, but it's a very two-dimensional kind of connection. I think our greatest vulnerability is what Heschel wrote about nearly 100 years ago, about being seen as average, about being potentially mocked by something that is very dear to us, or to be misunderstood. And in all of those cases, those are triggers that we see time and time again. In the political sphere, if you hear someone on one side griping about someone on the other side who, any of our presidents, there's always someone on the other side griping. And it's often a feeling of not being seen. If you ask, what the problem is, this president doesn't know people like me, or this president mocks people like me or the people I love. And then the complaints about how we're trying to talk to each other is we just got angry and ended up yelling, and we couldn't find any bridge to get to one another. I feel like that in order for us to connect, it's very helpful to reframe things and maybe show an even wider gulf. And let me explain that. So the reason I chose the story of the three Buddhist monks, and the reason it's so compelling to me all these years later, is because we never exchanged a word, the monks and us. We never spoke. And yet, we were all wearing uniforms. We were wearing medical uniforms. They were wearing religious uniforms. And we understood that we were all there. All 7 of us were there for one person. And that person was down the hall, and they were dying. And we didn't look alike, and we couldn't communicate to each other. But we too had a leader, a follower, a novice, and a crazy woman watching Petticoat Junction. Lisa was definitely the leader, by the way. And because we narrowed it down not to our 7 different personalities, or our 7 different roles, or our 7 different fears and vulnerabilities, and instead made it about one person whom we did not want to feel shamed, and we did not want them to feel scared or angry. In just a moment, we understood something bigger than ourselves. As we build communities, you already know this, I checked your website, it's on there. We must come into conversation with people who are different than we are. We must find ways to talk to people we don't agree with. We must find a common goal and belief somewhere. Even in Gaza now, there are still Palestinian mothers and Israeli mothers trying to make these things stop because they have one goal together, and that is their children, that their children not suffer as generations have suffered before. Each one of us is average, and each one of us is unique. And how will we work past our own vulnerability, past our own anger and shame, to see that in someone else? I'd like to close by sharing that yesterday I spent 3 hours studying 4 verses from Numbers, the book of Numbers, that aren't even interesting. They're not even interesting. They're not. It's basically God telling Moses, hey, get your people to step in line. I'm trying, tell them what to do. God, leader, Moses, follower. The Israelites, can I melt this down and make it into something? Spent 3 hours doing that, but the catch is that I was reading it from the Hebrew, and I'm learning how to chant Hebrew. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but in conservative Judaism in America, you chant from the Torah in Hebrew at every service. And by chant, I mean you're not just reading. There are these little marks that I have been ignoring for the 30 years I've known Hebrew, hence the glasses, and they tell you what to sing. And so whether you're supposed to go, ah, or whether you're supposed to go, or whether it's all these different tunes, and there are these tiny, tiny marks. And 3 hours of studying Torah flew by, and the reason it flew by is I have a tutor with whom I've been working for a couple of months, who is younger than I am. I'm dealing with it. One pair of glasses guy. I worked with the Rabbi Emeritus, who is a distinguished 70-something. That's a person I can learn from. And I had to get humble because there was a 13-year-old girl who had her bat mitzvah yesterday, and she got up and spoke on it. And so I listened to all of those people, and I listened to what was in myself, and I was thinking about all of you here, as you have in the over the decade that I've been with you, you have really tried to grow and to be responsible to yourself and to others, to connect with other people. And I realized that my message to you today isn't one of the leader. It's the one of the novice. And that is, keep enjoying the view. Don't give up. Keep looking around. There are more people in these seats, and now there are people out somewhere in the ether also watching than I've ever seen in 12 years. You're doing something right about building a better place, starting right here. And I'm so glad for you all that you have each other. Thank you. Glasses. Okay, I'm gonna sit down and drink a little water first. You go ready? Don't worry about it.
remember any. Oh, good. All right, so it's time for discussion. If you have somebody who wants to share?
Have you ever heard of progressive lenses?
These are progressive lenses. They would have to start up here, and I just have to, add another 3 degrees down there. Yeah, thank you, darling.
I have to say, I loved your whole speech. I thought of myself as being a person who does well at communicating, because things strike me when I see there's a breakdown in community, and somehow it comes to me the key to solving. I can't explain why, because it just comes to me. And I suppose I'm also a good listener, and that was taught to me in classes in psychiatry, psychology, which I actually began learning while I was in the Navy. So I really appreciate that. I just wonder if there is some, I suppose reading the book that you mentioned is probably a good way to get sharper on that. And maybe I should.
Yeah, the one, so this one's kind of further along in her journey. The one that I find really helpful, it's actually a leadership book. It's called Dare to Lead, but in it she talks about, that concept of badassery for her is just the courage to listen and then to be vulnerable with other people. But Dare to Lead is where she kind of sketches out these things. And what I love about it is, did anybody else have to read leadership books yeah. Oh, this face here, this face. Right. I never had a leadership book before that was about enjoying the journey of getting to connect with other people. And that's what I really liked about it. But you're exactly right. The listening is so crucial. It's just, and that's really what happens with the actors when we bring them in, because they're so amazing. They're really good actors. And they come in and they start talking, and then everyone's mouth drops open a little, and we stop talking and we listen to them.
I'm also an actor. I've done role-playing of various kinds.
Right.
Because you can't make a living as an actor around here. Thank you, anyway.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Oh, look, you were right. All those sparks. Come around this way.
First, I want to thank you for your presentation. It was beautiful and eloquent and soulful and full and funny, and I just loved it. And I'm really curious about the acting that you're talking about when people presenting how to deal with people who are going through this trauma, who have this anger. And, they say that in our lives we should always tread carefully around each other and treat each other gently, because you never know what someone's carrying. And we all have trauma. And I think it would be really useful if we all had access to seeing videos like that, and we could train ourselves in how to deal with people who are going through these traumas. And I'm wondering if they're publicly available or if they're not.
Not currently. So much of ours are so specific to organ donation, but I can give you some crib notes. One of the most common things that happens in these trainings is the actor says something just so beautiful. We have one scenario where the person in the bed is a twin, and one of the actors is the parent, and the other actor is the twin sibling. And we had an actor who was able to really get into that. And that actor said that their objection to ordination and why they found it so offensive and were so angry is we aren't just sisters. We aren't just bodies. Her body is my body. And at that point, my trainee does the timeout sign, and when they do that, all the actors put their heads down and pretend like they can't hear anything, so that they stay and focus. And my trainee turns and goes, "What do I say to that? That's so beautiful, I'm so moved." And I said, "You asked the question, and then you answered the question." And so she went out of timeout, and they lifted their heads, and she said, "That is so beautiful. I am so moved." And then they had silence for a while, and the actor said that it then felt safe to say more not out of anger, but to tell stories about what twinning is like, and to tell stories about wanting her sister to be honored and revered, like she honored and revered her. So I gotta say, the career note number one is half the time when you take the time to go, I don't know what to say, whatever comes out of your head next is actually what you're probably supposed to say, because it's vulnerable and authentic, and that's why you don't know how to say it, because it feels so dangerous to be vulnerable and authentic. In these trainings, we have had my people, the people who do the work, reveal something to the actor that I knew about my trainee, but I did not think, a loss that they had, where they will say, this reminds me of my own loss, and I can see why you feel this way, and that allows the other person, you don't want to do what we call missed empathy, she calls missed empathy, where you're like, oh, I know exactly how you feel when I lost it, blah, 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 blah. No. But instead say, you've now connected into something in me, and that allows them to talk more. And, I think it's precisely, and Don talks about listening, I think it's precisely because I've worked with death and dying my entire career that the conversations in general that I have with people with whom I disagree go better, because I'm used to people divulging to me very personal things. And so even if what they're divulging to me is, I cannot stand your political point of view, how can you be this love everybody, you don't know, you're just naive. I can kind of take that because dying people say terrible things to me. And I just let it go. And guess what? We're all dying people. So I think that's really helped in the conversations I've had. And then I find out, when I ask people, because we have gay kids, and so that's one of the things we care very deeply about. When I talk to someone who says that they're very much against that, when I ask them why, and if they're a person who's not completely overcome by their mental health challenges, all of that, when I share, well, when you say that, it makes me think of my own children. And I don't know if you have children, but they just are born who they are. You do your best, but they are going to be who they are. And usually, that's way better than your best. And in the case of my kids, they turned out better than the best I had to offer them. And it's just conversations like that I think really start to build things. And I do, the first version of this talk, I thought back to a time that wasn't perfect, but Unitarian Universalism in the 80s. And when we had all these people who totally disagreed with each other, and then would just come week after week, month after month, serve on committees together, pool all their money to do all these things. I'm like, how did we do that? And I think it's because the food wasn't as good. I do. I think it has something to do with foodies. I haven't quite figured all that out yet. I'll get back to you on another time on that. But, you didn't have to worry about everybody's food allergies because the food was pretty crappy. Nobody really wanted to eat it. So we became friends. that is oversimplifying it, and it isn't oversimplifying it. But obviously, these are things that I think about a lot, and I worry about the future of Unitarian Universalism, because I don't know if anyone told you, but it's a religion. And have you been told this? Okay. And religion's not doing well in America. And so I'm like, wow, I hope nobody finds out that UUs are religious, because then something bad might happen to them. Yeah, it's so lovely to be with all of you again. I don't do this anymore, this kind of thing, so it's very nice to be with you all.
Yeah, I think this idea of vulnerability is a very important one. I was trying to think through some of the most intense, painful dialogues we've got going on in the country now, from Jewish students to pro-Palestinian students, for example. And I do think, certainly on the Jewish student side, vulnerability has got to play an important role there. On the pro-Palestinian side, I think there's some identification with the Palestinian population and maybe some vicarious sense of vulnerability there. So,
I think I've also heard students on or friends who are on what feels like an anti-Semitic point of view, but they are my friends, and so I know that's not where they're coming from. But I think part of it is not wanting to be part of a military country that's doing this to other people. So it's not just about Israel and Palestine, it's about the United States and how much we contribute.
Yeah, that's true. I'm just going to say that one way to maybe mitigate this is to try to communicate in a way that doesn't make the other side feel so vulnerable. Now, it's hard to take a bunch of passionate college students and get them to fine-tune their rhetoric, but in theory, if Jewish students didn't feel like you were threatening me and you were threatening my heritage and you were threatening Israel, they would not feel so strongly about it. It's just hard to do that in the heat of the moment. But
oh, sure. Yeah, and you have cases of, the other problem is, of course, Judaism means a ton of different things. And so it means a cultural thing, it means a religious thing, it means an ethnic thing. They all mean, and Judaism itself is kind of like the Unitarian Universalism of the 80s, but more tried and true recipes, and that is that you will have a room full of Jewish people. My joke is very much similar to UUs, right? If you have a room of 63 UUs, you'll have 64 opinions. If you have a room of 63 Jews, you will definitely have 32 opinions, but we're not budging from any of them. I think you're right, but I think what you said, the most important part is we lose nuance. Anytime there's violence, it's because we've lost nuance, and so being able to understand the nuance of any situation that we're arguing about is really important.
I was just going to say that Brene Brown has done some TED Talks, two of them, that were done very early in her career. They're available, they're hilariously funny, and very informative. I would encourage anyone to start there.
And she, if anyone had told me that the New York Times bestseller was also a Southerner, like a Southerner with a PhD, that's what you should have told me. I would have been reading it a long time ago. And I don't know whether it was this one or not, but I opened up one of them, and she uses an expression that Janie Bell taught me back in West Point, and I was so glad to hear another person use it, like with a PhD. And so I'm always telling people, as we're trying to work out, some communication things, one of the problems we have is that our people are very sympathetic. And so they kind of forget that there's a recipient back here dying. And so they hear this story by this twin who doesn't want to donate, and they're so moved that they forget that their job is to save the people on the waiting list, if at all possible. And so I put that in a very clinical, after years of education and experience, which is that you got to dance with the one that done brung you. And Brene Brown uses that too. We good?
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This was the part I was looking the most forward to. So
Just one final thought from me. We talked about listening, and listening from the heart, listening with compassion, that's where it comes down to for me, not confronting, supporting when we can.
yeah, listening like the novice.
All right, we have another song, number 188 of your songbook. Come, come, whoever you are. Please stand as you're willing and able.
Let's do it 3 times. It's super
Short. All right, the chalice extinguished itself. So I'm going to extinguish the candle. We extinguish the chalice here that it might glow gently in our hearts. May it light your path as you leave this place. And may it guide your way until we are together again.
And our closing words from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel of blessed memory. A religious person is a person who holds the infinite and humanity in one thought at one time, at all times, who suffers within the harms that are done to others, whose greatest passion is compassion, whose greatest strength is love, and defiance of despair. Go in peace, friends.